Check, check, check.
Sound check 1, 2, 3. Sound check 1, 2, 3.
I can hear you.
Sound check 1, 2, 3. Sound check 1, 2, 3. Sound check 1, 2, 3. Sound check 1, 2, 3.
We're going to start in 1 minute. All right. Good morning, everyone. Bonjour à tous. Welcome to this Friday morning's Audit Committee meeting. Our first agenda item today is the Road Renewal Program Value for Money Audit. Auditor General Natalie Goujon will introduce the item, then Deputy Auditor General Joanne Gorenstein and Senior Auditor Corey Richardson will deliver a presentation for about 10 minutes. Following that presentation, the OAG will take questions from committee members before going to other members of council if they are present, and then we'll go to members of staff. If any staff are joining us virtually, we ask that you use the video feature on Zoom when responding. And as a note, as usual, this sequence of questions and answers will apply to all items at today's meeting. We'll then vote to receive the report and recommend it be sent to council for consideration. The second item is the investigation of the OC Transpo bus maintenance. Again, Auditor General Goujon will introduce the item and will be joined by Deputy Auditor General Gorenstein for approximately another 10-minute presentation on this report. We'll then go to questions in the same order, then vote to receive the report and send it to council. We'll next consider the semi-annual report on follow-up procedures, which we've seen before and always welcome. There's no presentation for this item though, but we'll have questions and then we'll receive it and send it to council for consideration. Lastly, we'll consider the audit work plan for the Ottawa Police Service. There's no presentation for this report either. We'll vote to receive it and send it to council. So let's get started. We'll start with roll call, please, Melanie.
Councillor Hill. Councillor Kavanaugh.
Present.
Councillor Carr. Here. Councillor Kitts.
Here.
Councillor Hubley.
Here.
Councillor Lowe.
Here.
Vice Chair Brown.
Here.
Chair Curry.
Here.
Quorum.
Thank you very much. All right, so declarations of interest. Anybody have any declaration of interest? No? All right, confirmation of minutes of Monday, June 24th, 2024. Are these minutes confirmed? All right, so we will go right to the Office of the Auditor General for item 4.1.
Merci, Madame la Présidente et chers membres du Comité de la vérification. Le premier rapport que nous souhaitons vous présenter aujourd'hui porte sur la vérification de l'optimisation des ressources du programme de réfection des routes. I'd like to actually take a minute here. We usually do just a very informal thanks to staff. I think this audit was a really good experience on both sides of the table, and I wanted to really take a moment to thank staff, not just for obviously assisting us through the course of this audit, but also for their collaboration. It's not always easy going through an audit. They took the time to ensure we had a very good understanding of the subject matter at hand. And we're also very, very open to the recommendations that we put forward. So I think that's something that I wanted to highlight. And before I pass the presentation over to Deputy Auditor General Joanne Gorenstein and our Senior Auditor Corey Richardson, I'd like to introduce one of our subject matter experts that we have online with us, Mr. Ted Phillips. Ted has over 35 years of experience with the Ministry of Transportation of Ontario, as well as over 10 years of consulting experience with experience in the fields of pavement design, pavement asset management, materials, as well as most pavement rehabilitation and preservation strategies. I wanted to say that Ted was also a very valuable member of our team throughout this audit, and he'll be happy to assist us in answering some of your questions at the end of the presentation that might be a little bit more technical in nature. Prochaine diapositive, s'il vous plaît.
Thank you and good morning. The City of Ottawa has the largest geographical area of Canada's major cities with over 6,000 kilometers of roadways. The city's road network is made up of various road classes. The current approved strategy is to focus funding on higher volume collector, arterial, and remaining freeway road sections. As outlined in the Transportation Asset Management Plan, the estimated cost to maintain all of the roads at the current level of service is over $1.5 billion, resulting in a funding gap of over $920 million. Local roads represent 72% of this gap. Road renewal is the strategic rehabilitation of road assets. This rehabilitation of the existing network is essential to preserving assets in a limited infrastructure funding environment. Of the $609 million in projected total infrastructure investment for 2024, 98.7 million is budgeted for road renewal. Next slide, please. The objective of this audit was to assess the efficiency, effectiveness, and economy of road asset management at the city, specifically how road renewal is planned, designed, constructed, and monitored. The audit focused on key aspects of road asset management renewal and how they provide the most value for money to the city. This included condition and needs assessment, prioritization of activities, design and construction of appropriate roadwork, as well as quality assurance for the fiscal years 2022 and 2023, as well as some in-progress projects for 2024. The scope of the audit did not include maintenance activities such as pothole filling, growth projects, or the road cut permitting process of right-of-way activities. However, coordination activities with various teams across the city were examined, as well as the inspection and oversight work performed by the Right-of-Way Heritage and Urban Design Services Group. I will now pass the presentation on to Corey Richardson to walk you through our findings. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Joanne. Our first findings relate to the data used to establish the road renewal program. So the city performs regular assessment of the road conditions, and this data is maintained in the pavement management system called Road Matrix. So there were issues with age and completeness for some of the road attributes in Road Matrix, and some attributes do not have an established standard for collection frequency. While we understand the sensitivities of these attributes have not yet been analyzed, the absence of a standard for data collection increases the risk of deficient data, which can impact the effectiveness of the planning. Additionally, the output of the prioritization process within Road Matrix forms the initial candidate list for projects. Though there's legitimate engineering rationale for projects selected outside of this list, management was unable to provide documentation in some instances of the justification for many of the change in prioritization for the revised candidate list. Go to the next slide, please. So these next findings are related to individual project level data used for the design of road renewal projects. So a key data point in the design of roads is the traffic and truck volume on road sections to be treated, which is factored into the asphalt mix required. Traffic data within 2 years is ideal, and data over 5 years is generally considered unreliable. For projects that we sampled as part of the audit, the average age for traffic data used was over 4 years old, and in a third of the cases, it was over 5 years old. Should be noted, though, that management has indicated that traffic patterns were impacted by the pandemic. So in some cases, it would have been more appropriate to use the pre-pandemic data. City specifications also lay out the requirements for the asphalt mix selection based on traffic and truck volumes, as well as for the road class. Our audit identified some projects which selected a higher level asphalt from what would have been expected based on the city's specifications. In these cases, a less expensive asphalt mix could have been appropriately used based on the established criteria. We understand that the city has generally taken a conservative approach to asphalt mix selection. Using a higher level asphalt mix can add significant material costs to projects without necessarily extending the road's useful life. Go to the next slide, please. Our next findings relate to the city oversight of the quality assurance activities. So city guidelines state that the city or its representatives must observe asphalt sampling performed by the contractor, the sealing of the sample, as well as retain custody of the samples until it's transferred to the third-party laboratory. So during the audit, it was confirmed that this is not the regular practice for city representatives to directly oversee this quality assurance activities or to retain custody of the sample. Though it's ultimately the responsibility of the contractor to ensure that the quality assurance requirements are met, without the city embedding these oversight into the process, there's a risk that the city could be paying for substandard materials. Additionally, reclaimed asphalt pavement is processed from existing pavement and can be added along with other undesirable materials to asphalt, as it's much cheaper for the asphalt producer to make. While some reclaimed asphalt can be used in certain projects, specifications dictate how much can be used without impacting the overall quality of the road. Substitution of materials is a known issue in the pavement industry and can lead to significantly lower road quality and faster deterioration of the roads. So there's currently no testing program for the substitution of reclaimed asphalt pavement or other undesirable materials for completed city projects. And therefore, the city could unknowingly be receiving and paying for substandard materials. Finally, road cut permits are issued to utility companies or other stakeholders to get access to the infrastructure under or around the road. Without proper reinstatement of these road cuts, it can cause significant degradation to the city roads. So the city puts the onus on the permit holder to reinstate the road to a specific standard. And the city can request testing to certify the quality of these reinstatements. However, to date, the city has not requested any testing from permit holders to verify the reinstatement quality. Go to the next slide, please. So the city's strategy for transportation, our strategies are evolving towards a multimodal, holistic approach. So this calls for enhancements to the renewed roads, such as cycle tracks and pedestrian crossings and other additions, which are included on a case-by-case basis. Because road renewals must consider these enhancements, additional consideration is required for each renewal project. While Asset Management Service manages the coordination of the road renewal projects across the city, key inputs and deliverables from various groups are required. Accountabilities and timelines for inputs and deliverables on projects from key stakeholders outside of Asset Management Service are not formally defined, and there are no formal expectations established. So delays in inputs can result in less defined projects, which can lead to later tendering as well as increased change orders. These factors can delay the timing and increase the price of the project. With respect to reporting, details on the road renewal program, including the pavement area, the budget spend on treatment categories such as preservation or rehabilitation, reconstruction, are not regularly reported to stakeholders. Additionally, concepts such as the remaining service life, average pavement quality index by road class, life extension by treatment categories, as well as presenting varied models for treatment strategies and their benefits, were identified as best practices in the industry for reporting on road renewal programs and could be considered at the city. Reporting on key program metrics would increase transparency and be a valuable communication and decision-making tool to measure the effectiveness of the program. Go to the next slide, please. Our audit also identified some areas for future improvements. So cold in-place recycling and other similar approaches are rehabilitation techniques that involve removing and reusing the existing surface of the road. These methods use fewer raw materials and reduce the hauling distances, resulting in energy and cost savings. We understand from management that these treatments have been used at the city in the past, though they were stopped in 2012 due to some concerns over overall quality. We understand that other jurisdictions across Ontario are currently leveraging these methods, and there may be opportunities to revisit the feasibility of these treatments in future road planning with potential for cost savings and more environmentally sustainable treatments. Additionally, as part of the road cut reinstatement work, if there is insufficient compaction of the asphalt, the pavement will settle improperly and can lead to performance issues. So in order to improve the performance of road cut reinstatement and the lifespan of the road, some municipalities are requiring the use of unshrinkable backfill. So this uses small amounts of cement to reduce the need for compaction, which can improve the overall lifespan of the road cut. So there may be an opportunity to leverage this approach for future to improve reinstatement quality. I'm going to pass it back to Joanne to conclude. Thanks. Next slide, please.
So although the city's overall transportation strategy is evolving, road renewal is a mature program that has embedded many best practices into their processes. The city has an advanced pavement management system to track and assess road conditions and leverages innovative data collection tools. Further, aligned with the approved renewal strategy, the city continues to successfully deliver an increasing renewal program that includes projects with road enhancements. While the city has structures in place to prioritize as well as design and deliver on road renewal projects, as noted earlier, the audit identified opportunities to improve the data used to prioritize and design projects and the overall quality assurance work performed by contractors. Our audit further identified potential opportunities now and into the future to improve the value for money gained from the renewal program. Our report issued 13 recommendations and management has agreed to all of them. If it pleases the chair, we would be happy to take any questions from members of committee.
Thank you very much for that. Just so we're all clear, there are no delegations on this item, so we won't go to delegations. So questions for the Office of the Auditor General. Councillor Hubley.
Thank you, Chair. I just have a couple. Where you mentioned about the doing the road assessments to see if they qualify or need to have work and to what degree of work, is there actually reports produced about that? Like the report, sorry, I should be more clear. Reports on the individual roads. When a councillor says, I've got this road in my area, it's in bad shape, residents are complaining, we create the service request, somebody goes out and assesses that road, but I've never actually seen a formal report, some kind of a document telling me that this is how they assess the road and this is the outcome.
Chair, thank you very much for the question, Councillor. What I would first say is that information is used in determining the prioritization of the roads and then the work performed. But to really get into the details of what reports are available, I would recommend that question be directed to staff.
Okay. So you didn't, as part of your process, you didn't review to see if there's any documentation or anything on the assessments. Is that what you're saying?
We definitely did review this. Sorry, Chair, thanks. We did review this, the prioritization. So this is done internally in AMS. The road matrix has all of the data built within it. This will generate an additional list, and then the revised list will include things such as you mentioned. If a councillor will bring a road to attention, then the AMS staff will go out and do a road tour and inspect that road and see if it warrants being added to the revised list. But it doesn't. This isn't a produced report to stakeholders.
Okay, so it's on a system that they access. Okay, I get it. And then they prioritize the roads, and that's how we get the end product. Okay, the second part I want to ask was there was a previous audit done on asphalt, like road maintenance and in particular asphalt and the testing and quality of it. Several of the recommendations I remember from that audit are now recommendations in this audit. Was there anything, to start with, did the AG's office actually review the previous audit before they started this, or did they start from scratch?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, so that audit was done on maintenance work. So that's like the potholes and crack filling. So that's a different process in a different department. So the testing program that was built in there, that's separate from the testing program that would be done for the road renewal program. And
just to add to that, Chair, just to be a little bit more specific, it was actually an investigation with regards to those particular items. So it was a much more narrow scope of work that was performed by my predecessor.
Okay, but the recommendations to do testing for the city and the supplier to have a criteria and do standardized testing of the asphalt and everything, if that's being done, I'm assuming if it's being done for road repair, would we not use the same testing requirements and everything for this program as well?
So Chair, so that process is different, and there's several different types of tests that happen. There's testing even before any asphalt gets laid. There's testing that happens during the laying, and then there's testing after on the completed projects. So I can't speak to exactly which testing you're referring to in the investigation or the old audit, but we reviewed the testing that's involved in the road renewal program.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions.
Madam Auditor General, what I was also going to say is if you feel we need to go to Ted Phillips for a question, if you can just say that and let him know, because I'm not sure, I can see him on screen, but if you feel you need an expert, you just let me know.
Absolutely. Will do. Thank you.
All right. Okay. Councillor Kavanagh.
Yeah, thank you. No, I appreciate the audit. Particularly about road cuts, because that's a fact of life when you have infill. And we're getting a lot of infill. And it's probably a major reason we get calls is very badly done road cuts. And so I appreciate the work that was done on that, because what happens is they sink. And we're seeing that, and then, you know, it's a reverse speed bump for a lot of these roads that get new housing infill, and we're going to see a lot more of that. So I think it was very timely to talk about it. In terms of comparison, are we on par with other cities in terms of we've just raised our the pavement degradation framework assessment, the fees, are we on par with other cities on our fees?
Thanks. So Chair, that whole pavement degradation analysis, which, I mean, you could probably ask staff to speak more on that, but my understanding was that was done to bring us up to something that's more in the realm of other municipalities.
Okay, but in your study, I was asking you because I thought you may have seen that from other cities, what their fees were.
Yeah, that's in that assessment. And it brought us up to something that is comparable.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Kitts.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm Auditor General. You and I started at City Hall around the same time, and you routinely meet with councillors and ask if we have anything on our radar for an audit. And I think every single meeting we've had, I've said roads, asphalt procurement, value for money, roads audit. So most of my questions are actually for staff, but I just really wanted to thank you. You've had a lot of time sensitive audits on your plate in your tenure, and I just really appreciate the work on this. So thanks to the whole team.
Thank you very much, Councillor.
Thank you. Councillor Carr?
Thanks very much. I don't really have any specific questions for the Auditor General, other than the fact that when I looked through the audit, I was concerned about prioritization. Did you uncover any evidence that perhaps some of these prioritization decisions were perhaps political in nature?
Chair, what I can say is, unfortunately, in some cases, just the decisions that were made, we didn't see documentation to help support them. Now, there could be very good rationales for why certain elements weren't done or were done, but due to the lack of documentation, we're not able to see that. So I wouldn't, for lack of a politically correct word, I don't want to throw staff under the bus, because there very well could be appropriate decisions. Unfortunately, we just don't have all the information for us to actually conclude on that. So we were not able to.
Okay, thanks very much. Just, I'm a fairly quiet, soft-spoken councillor, so I just wondered, if this is something where the louder people were speaking up for once. But anyway, thank you very much.
Not a problem.
Thank you. I don't see any other speakers. I just have a couple of questions and comments. Just following on what Councillor Carr said, though, when you were looking at the process for where a councillor's request might jump the queue, as we say, did you see a process that would be justifiable to say, well, then there were valid reasons for why this road would get ahead of every other road when there's, and let me just give you a partial answer. If you've already said that the data is not great, and yet you'll also say councillors can put requests in, are the two sort of related?
Thank you for the question, Chair. As you mentioned, obviously, in some cases, we see instances where the data may be outdated. We're not sure the true impact of that in some particular instances. And because of that, I could see, let's say the data is outdated and is incorrect, and councillors are seeing something in their ward or on a particular street that's causing significant issues, and they're raising that to staff. I could see how that would be a potential rationale for changing where that road would fall on the spectrum of candidate lists, but I'll leave it to my staff to add a little more to that.
Yeah, so there's always going to be a verification of whether it comes from a councillor or whoever. The AMS team is always going to go out and inspect that road to see if it does need the renewal. It's just that where it falls on the prioritization list, some of the documentation there was lacking. So sometimes it was hard for us to justify where in the list it landed. But staff, I'm sure, could speak more on what exactly they do when they receive something from the councillors. But everything is always verified to make sure that there is a need for the road. be on the list.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm gonna go to Councillor Kitts, just before but I have one last thing, but I'll go back to you.
Sure. I just did think of a question related to the previous two. Did you observe efforts being made, I guess, to distribute dollars for roads equitably across the city rather than perhaps where the priorities are? Was that something that you saw?
Chair, what I can state is what we saw implemented would be a council direction on where the emphasis was placed, which is going to be on the arterials and the collectors and arterials. And so I don't necessarily think it is ward specific or an equitable distribution that strategy is based off of. That strategy is based off of the greatest need and prioritization and the greatest impact, I think, back to the city residents.
All right, my last question, I think, for the Auditor General. There was a project we talked about, I believe it was that cameras would be installed on OC Transpo buses and city vehicles, where those cameras could then let staff know about when roads were bad, potholes were a problem, even signage that was, knocked over by a snowplow. Did you look at any of that or any of the technology that might help us get better data instead of having staff drive out and look at a road and waste a lot of time? Did you look at that at all?
The primary method for collecting is it's a large van that has a whole bunch of sensors on it. So that's a pretty industry best practice way of collecting the data. So but in talks with staff, they're always looking for other ways and trying to stay up to pace with the latest technologies. But in terms of the specific camera on the buses, no, we didn't discuss that.
I'm looking to Mr. Phillips to see if he's got anything else that he may want to add with regards to technology out in the industry.
Yeah, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Am I coming through there? Yes. Interesting question. Thank you, Natalie. I have not, unfortunately, dealt with any of the technologies like the public using, cell phones and videos or things mounted on cameras. I've heard these are things that are coming on board, but to go back to what Corey said, my experience has been with the van with the different mechanized pieces of collection equipment to create your database. So unfortunately, I don't have any direct experience with what was being mentioned there.
Okay, thanks for that. I think there are, every day there's new technologies, right? There's drone technology that would save a lot of time. I actually do have one other comment. The section of the report where we talked about, or you talked about, that core samples of the road afterwards were not being monitored, that, basically the person who put the road down could take a fake sample and say, look, we did this high quality work, when really it was not. Did we determine, or did you determine any time that has actually happened to roads in the city of Ottawa?
Chair, because we know it's such a pervasive issue, we decided not to invest money in testing. You'd be surprised how much it costs just to test one sample of asphalt. It's not a low cost element, and for us to see if it was a pervasive issue, we'd have to do a fairly large sample in order to conclude on that. So knowing that it is an industry issue, it's an industry-wide issue, we focused more on ensuring that a process was in place in order to identify those issues as opposed to us doing the testing itself.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, thank you very much for that. Now we will go to questions of staff. Councillor Hill.
Thank you very much. Just to pile on to that last commentary about perhaps nefarious actors in the industry that might be taking advantage of opportunities to use lower cost, lower grade material than contract authorized or the contract had compliance to. Are the existing fines and deterrents adequate, or do we need to either make some changes to that internally or advocate to the province for changes on fines and sentences?
Which staff is going to take that question? Fines, advocating.
We were in transit, Madam Chair. Could you repeat the question?
For sure. My question is, are the existing fines an adequate deterrent to nefarious actors in industry on this topic?
Madam Chair, our specifications includes fines or other, even up to a replacement of asphalt if our testing determines that they don't pass, that the asphalt that was used was incorrect. However, we do agree with the recommendation that the auditor has flagged related to the testing elements that we need to improve, for example, the recycled asphalt or the chain of command that today we are not having. So today the contractor sends the testing, the samples to our lab within 24 hours, but we don't witness that that submission. So we agree that that can provide an opportunity for a gap, and we will follow with processes to make sure that we witness the testing and we do the chain of command.
So you are not asking for any advocacy or changes to those deterrents that would cause a potentially nefarious actor in the industry from taking advantage of city processes and providing substandard work?
Madam Chair, what we are doing is increasing our due diligence to make sure that that doesn't happen.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Brown, or Vice Chair Brown.
Either one would have been good. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. With regards to road cut permits, and Councillor Kavanagh already spoke to this, typically where I've seen some road cuts take place in my ward are along local roads, and they're so far down the resurfacing list. When these road cuts sink, as Councillor Kavanagh alluded to, that's now the new permanent structure of the road. When we issue the permits for those road cuts, is there a reason that, for example, if a water line was to run down one side of a local street, we don't have the entire road repaved instead of just half of the road, creating a seam down the entire length of the street?
Madam Chair, I'll speak to the road cut process that council put in place in 2022. When a road cut permit application is submitted, our staff log it in our system. When the developer or the utility provider or the city, quite frankly, completes its road cut, we go out and inspect for the first time. That invokes a 2-year warranty period. At the end of the 2-year warranty period, we inspect again, and we typically only tolerate about a 1-inch compaction on that road cut permit. What changed dramatically in 2022, and what I hope members of council are seeing on a go-forward basis, is now if there's 3 or more cuts, they're horizontal in nature. So to your point, councillor, crossing the roadbed, we now require an asphalt overlay undertaken. So whereas before it was a zebra, you'd have your 2 or 3 or 4 or 10 stripes. Now we require a complete lane to be overlaid with brand new asphalt. That is the standard that we have in place right now, but we do review our standards on an annual basis with my colleague, Ms. John's team in asset management.
Thank you very much, Court. And so just, I guess the second part of my question then is, if this is down the entire length of a street, not crossing the road, but going down it, why do we accept that now there is essentially 2 different standards of asphalt on the same street? And then with that seam being created down the middle of the road, does that not impact the quality of the road, freeze thaw cycles and then water penetration?
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. An asphalt layer that is never touched has the highest level of integrity. Yes, your observation that a change to the road affects its life, has a possibility of affecting its life cycle. And the change that you're describing with the seam down the middle would have a different impact than the zebras that Mr. Curry described. It is a degradation, and that's part of why the structure of the road activity bylaw, the penalties, the warranty checks, and then I'll layer on the additional recommendations that this report includes from the auditor to consider changes in the future about the nature of the material that's used for the backfill, as well as the suggestion, the recommendation that we've accepted for ROHUD and asset management to coordinate more closely on having road cut information available and considered in the road prioritization methodology. So it is, the asset management was involved in the road activity bylaw update because it is a fact that road cuts affect the life cycle of the road compared to one that's never been touched. But the change to have one lane instead of a series of cuts is an attempt to provide a longer life cycle for the road.
Thank you very much. And my last question, Madam Chair, when we reviewed the potential to have lower quality materials used without impacting the overall quality of whatever asphalt project is taking place at that time, what would be a real world example of where we might be able to reduce the quality of the material without impacting the overall project?
Madam Chair, the recommendation from the auditor with the expert advice of Mr. Phillips does provide the fact that there is quite a selection of possible asphalt grades. And it identifies that sometimes there would be a cost differential that would be worth pursuing in terms of lower cost materials. We have accepted the recommendation to do further study on when that is possible and why, because there is a actual real world data mentioned in the report that there's an industry implementation side of that suggestion, because if a contract goes out with 3 or 4 or 5 different kinds of asphalt, which may theoretically be differentially priced within one contract, that's more effort. We are maybe not going to secure higher prices. There is a whole conversation with our industry, which Ms. Duclos could speak to better than me, about achieving those savings. And so that's part of what we will investigate further to make sure that we are having the full continuum of information on what the technical recommendation could be in asset management and the reality once we come to a contract and see prices. It's an opportunity for more investigation because it is a possibility that would be a way of saving some money.
Thank you very much. And just a quick thank you to the Auditor General and her team for some more great work. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Lowe.
Thank you, Chair. Going back to your response on that last question, I understand if it's like, a major road rebuild or a corridor rehabilitation project, you probably want to procure similar materials for the sake of procuring as few types of material as possible. But I see, I'm guessing, there are opportunities where we're just, let's say, redoing the pathway that's beside the road, or we're only doing the road and not the pathway, where that's where we can sort of explore different grade material. With my thought, would that be sort of what that response was hinting at?
Madam Chair, there's a lot of factors that take into account, because one of them, for instance, is the work that infrastructure services does, because while asset management will identify a program of roads that council sees in the budget for approval, how that's delivered, how are they bundled? Are they bundled geographically? Are they bundled all the locals are together? Are there rules? Those are decisions that infrastructure services takes into account, and it's their expertise that adds another layer of due diligence and good value. So yes, possibly, but there are other considerations to be had in making that decision.
So similarly, like you might bundle a pathway project into several road resurfacing projects, and therefore it may be more cost effective to get one type of asphalt that way. Okay. Do you have sort of an overview of the different grades of asphalt that we do use? Like, the asphalt that we use on the 174 and the Transitway, is that the same as what we use on our MUPs, for example?
No, Madam Chair, the asphalt mix takes into consideration the traffic volume, how many heavy vehicles. There's a lot of detailed technical variables that feed into the selection of the asphalt mix. I think the auditor spoke about that, a longer list than I can say off the top of my head of what those factors are. But yes, there's quite a menu of choices to match for the job that the road does, and making sure that it has a long life.
Okay, thanks very much. Most of the other questions I had were sort of hashed out already, but I will sort of repeat one of the concerns that were raised about road cuts. And in communities where there's a lot of infill development, or in communities where there's empty lots that are being developed, sometimes you get series of lateral road cuts across the road, and they're different ages, which means they deteriorate at a different rate, or they're at a different stage of deterioration, and it just creates a little bit of a roller coaster, a very subtle roller coaster, but it's uncomfortable nonetheless. So I'm glad, I'm happy to hear, the stuff that you had responded to earlier, and hoping that things go on the up going forward with this audit. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lowe. Councillor Kavanagh.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, staff. I appreciate that in 2022 that you've improved the system for road cuts. I appreciate that. We get a lot of calls on road cuts. And it's going to be a fact of life because we're seeing intensification. We're being told that, that we have to have 3 units per parcel of land. We're obviously, road cuts are going to be our future. So it's massively important. Are we tracking well, in my office, it's based on complaints. Are you seeing less complaints since you've integrated this system? Because I'm still getting the calls, and I just wanted to know how you monitor that, because it's very frustrating, because the 2 years later isn't good enough. That's, we're finding it like a month after that people are complaining about it. And more frustrating is when it's not even infill, it's just a bigger house or something. That's even more frustrating, but that we allow it. So just wanted to get an idea of how you're keeping track of that.
Thanks, Councillor. Chair, Council's investment in 2022 was a wholesale service review. We went from 3 road cut inspectors to 7 now. So we're now on a geographic base covering all of the city of Ottawa. And to your point, Councillor, yes, we're very data rich now. Whereas before, quite frankly, it was tracked in Excel spreadsheets. We're now logging everything in our land management system. I can tell you we've had 2,468 road cut applications so far this year, and we're managing the warranties on 7,811 right now over the last, so that was 2023 and 2022. So when that permit comes in and we're notified that the work is done, we are on site to immediately inspect the road cut. And as I indicated, then that starts a 2-year warranty period. So before the 2-year warranty period expires, at the 2-year warranty expiry date, we're back out there again with the contractor looking at the compaction and any degradation. And we do hold bonds and securities, so we are able to pull on those if required. However, we're pretty effective in terms of getting the contractor to do the work themselves. I will also flag that we get, and I don't have the stat with me, but I want to say upwards to about 2,000 to 3,000 service requests a year from 311 that come in on disturbances in the road. And we effectively triage those between my service area and roads and parking services to look at whether it truly is a road cut or whether it is a pothole or road repair work. And that has been a very robust service renewal that's been undertaken over the last 2 years, where we're way more effective in the field in terms of getting patches either repaired by a contractor or city forces doing the work if it indeed is our asset.
Thank you. No, I appreciate that. And I'm glad you mentioned the 311 call. So they're getting integrated in so that it's being tracked. I know, appreciate that. we'll let you know too, how it's going from our end. In terms of enhancements and improvements to roads, when a road comes up for renewal, there's opportunity, and this was a subject that was raised. In terms of cycle tracks or just even shoulders on rural roads, we've talked about this. I see lots of opportunity out there, and I just want to make sure that it's being done systematically, because it's frustrating to see a road that's going to be redone and there's no improvement for cyclists, for example, when you could have a decent shoulder. Sometimes there is, like Carp Road's good, by the way, but others not so much. And I just have no idea how that's done.
Madam Chair, this is an important opportunity that the resurfacing program provides. And I'm going to start, and then I'm going to see if Ms. Chi could add on. The focus of the resurfacing program, the reason that we have it and the delegation that we have from council is to renew what is there. And so any road that's going to be resurfaced that has any active transportation or speed bumps or anything like that, if it was there, it's going to be replaced and put back in. There are a couple of things that the road resurfacing program includes. For one, the road safety edge in rural roads is something that the rural program includes based on traffic safety recommendations. There are sometimes rumble strips that are added, and actually there is funding that comes from traffic safety to support that program as an addition to road resurfacing. And then the paved shoulders in rural areas where the cycling network in the transportation master plan dictates. When there's anything new to be added, that cost needs to come from the active transportation budget. And that's the kind of coordination piece that the auditor spoke about, that we try to align our programs and our priorities to make sure that if there is an opportunity to add an active transportation element, the road resurfacing can wait for that funding to align to make sure that we don't miss that opportunity. But and so Ms. Chi may be able to speak to that, but the coordination level to make sure we don't miss that opportunity is very high, and it is flexible to make sure that the outcome has the highest and best what we can deliver, the best effective reinstatement, and reinstatement sometimes with an addition. But it is not, the road renewal program is to renew roads, not to add new things. It's to identify that opportunity, but the road renewal program is very important to council. We get a lot of inquiries about it, and adding new things takes away from the renewal of something else.
Thank you, but my point is that there's opportunities that would save a lot of money in the future if you wouldn't want to add things separately. So if something comes up, certainly a lot cheaper than adding it later. Correct?
Madam Chair, it can be. Certainly that's our perception, that it's easier to do things at the same time. But I was thinking of March Valley, the conversation that we had is we didn't have information at the same level of advancement for for geotechnical information, that kind of thing. Those can be obstacles because the preparation on the hurdles that a road passes to make it a candidate in the budget. The adding at the last minute is not always possible because it wouldn't be good value. It would not have the same due diligence and preparation as other things. It isn't always cheaper. It is an opportunity to investigate, but going back to add traffic calming measures after the fact, we do that separate from road renewal. And we would have to do investigation to see if the savings is considerable, because it is just added scope, new lines in the contract for the contractor, either standalone or integrated with another project.
Happy to talk to you about future projects. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kitts.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a lot of questions, so you can cut me off if needed. Quality of the road cut was particularly interesting to me. Before we started, I was thanking some staff in the gallery for helping with a particularly challenging road cut on Navin Road that anyone in the area would be familiar with. wards like mine, where there's a lot of development, these road cuts happen constantly, and I can see firsthand the lack of quality, but we've spent some time on road cuts already. So I think based on your comments, what I'm hearing is that you're evolving the strategy for testing and quality control to reduce accelerated degradation, not completely, but to assist with that.
Thanks for the question, Councillor Chair. I think what this audit has been really helpful for us to learn from is that primarily our inspections are on a visual basis. We have the inspector in the field looking at compaction and hearing about the backfilling that was undertaken underneath that cut. What the auditor has recommended to us is that we invoke the authorities that we already have in the bylaw more frequently, which is requiring lab results of what went into that cut. What was the backfill? Not just taking the contractor's good word, but actually asking for certified lab results. And so what we will be designing over the next quarter is a program that now, whether it's on a random basis or on a focused on high flyers or bad performers, we're able to get more scientific data as to what went into that cut for better data management and better inspection, quite frankly.
Okay, so it won't be in every instance, but there'll be sort of some metrics that you'll be looking at if there's a bad actor or, you know, other factors in that area that you would require one.
Exactly. I think we have to strike the balance, and we'll work with the National Capital Heavy Construction Association on this. Asking for a lab scientific undertaking for every single cut probably wouldn't make financial sense for this year already 2,500 cuts, but we can certainly focus on those that need extra focus or randomize. We will develop a proposed system, and we'll certainly report that out to council.
Okay, that's great. And I think this is related, perhaps not in scope for the audit, but are soil conditions monitored and evaluated as it pertains to road work? Because would it be fair to say that areas that have significant lead of clay, the road is going to degrade quicker than, you know, if there's different soil conditions?
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. You're right. The entire environment of below the asphalt has a lot of influence on how the road performs over a long period of time. And if you were going to build a brand new road, you're not going to do it without geotechnical evaluations and a recommendation from a geotechnical engineer that tells you how to build that road, how deep to go, what the layers of stone are, what size they are, what the gradation is, to try and give you the longest life road. So yes, that is one of the pre-road studies that we do to make sure that we get best value with the recommended road that we want to build.
Okay, thank you. I know I'm always painting doom and gloom in Ward 19, but I feel like we're getting hit with a double whammy because we have a ton of road cuts, and then we also have significant soil concerns. So I guess what I'm asking is that considered in your prioritization process?
Madam Chair, the prioritization process, the methodology and all the steps, the number one variable that inputs into that is the condition of the road. That's the variable that has the most weight. And so the condition of the road will vary depending on the circumstances that you describe, and it would support the steps that would need to be taken. It would be a factor in the steps that need to be taken as it moves its way through to implementation. But the prioritization process is based on the traffic volume, the condition of the road, how well or smoothly or bumpy is that road? Is that pavement degrading? Are there cracks? Is there potholes? That kind of thing. It doesn't go beyond that in terms of assessing information.
So not a double whammy, a triple whammy because of traffic volume, but I'll leave that there. I have a ward that touches the city boundary. I often hear people alleging that projects are much more expensive in Ottawa than they are just outside of it. The audit said the city's opted for higher class asphalt mixes than what is required by Ontario regulations. And maybe this is a clarification question for the Auditor General, but did the audit say that there was no correlation between the higher class asphalt mix and the longevity of the asphalt, or is it just not known because we're lacking some data?
Chair, what I can state was there was instances where we would review the project charter. So that's where they identify the specifications that the road requires. It goes through items such as the traffic volume, as we talked about, being one of the key attributes that's looked at when determining the appropriate grade that's selected. And there were definitely instances in which a lower grade could have been used. And I'll look to Ted here in a minute. But my understanding is that in many instances, you could use, in this case, you could use a lower grade asphalt and it would not impact the longevity of the road. So from a value for money perspective, that's where we're raising our concerns. But I think that's also where staff came in to state that there are instances where, for example, their contractors may not carry that particular grade. And that's where a couple of our recommendations come into play together, which is pushing the industry a little bit in instances where we may get more value for money. But I'll look to Ted if he'd like to speak a little bit more about the differentials in grade.
Yeah, certainly. Thank you. And thank you, Chair and Councillor. There's a lot of different aspects to this, but I guess just to summarize, as Natalie mentioned, we did look at the design charts that you have within your specifications. And there were things like an upgrade in the asphalt cement grade, or an upgrade in the type of aggregate that had to go into the mix. And while technically there's nothing wrong on an individual project, I guess with ensuring that you've got a really high quality material, the standard programs designed for what type of asphalt you need, what type of mix you need, given a certain traffic volume, and particularly axle loads in the commercial vehicles was being exceeded on a few of these projects, and that did lead to an extra cost. And my experience with the Ministry of Transportation was that there were opportunities to go back to just the recommended mix in the design chart that's part of your specifications. I guess it's just a matter of recognizing the deficit that there is with your road networks, which is not uncommon, by the way, with other municipalities in the ministry that I work with. But you don't need a Toyota Pathfinder when a Toyota Corolla will do you quite nicely. I guess if that helps, we can. There's much more to this, but I hope that's a simple explanation.
Yes, thank you very much. That was helpful. So then back to staff. The Auditor General mentioned sometimes it's availability of the product, but is there anything else that's the impotence for using a higher quality than allegedly is needed?
Madam Chair, based on the technical analysis of the needs of the road and how it will perform over long term, I think I'll go back to my earlier comment, is that in our marketplace, the availability of one of the ingredients in asphalt is different sizes and different qualities of rocks, the gravel that goes into it. And in Ottawa, we don't really have much market difference. It's a fairly available resource in this community. So I think our commitment supporting the auditor's recommendation to do more investigation is, if you were going to spend $190 a ton for this grade, which is the result of the technical recommendation, and you're not likely to come back and pave this road again for X number of years, and you know that it's X plus, it's usually longer than we would like, would you go to $240 a ton because you're not going to be coming back, or because of a number of other factors? So it's that investigation that I think we'd like to better document those decisions and standardize consistently how those decisions are made for the staff that are making those recommendations, because the work that they do individually needs to be consistent all across, and that's where the development of a standard and the documentation of those rationales, I think, will be an improvement as the auditor recommended.
Okay. Those will be good improvements. Is there anything else that would be contributing to more expensive contracts in the city versus outside of it?
Madam Chair, the market is a real consideration. Ms. Duclos could speak to the experience that we've had this year is quite different than experience that we've had in the last couple of years. And it isn't something that we can anticipate or predict. Some years the contracts come in lower value, reflecting market conditions. Sometimes they're higher value. So that as a variable, compared to these other variables, like what mix is selected, that would be also an interesting thing to look at. There is definitely a correlation between when we tender. And again, suggesting market conditions. So if we can tender very early in the season, when the contractors have a lot of capacity, they're eager for work, and the prices are more competitive. So that's something that Infrastructure Services has tried to do to, again, maximize the benefit of the investment that the city is making.
Okay. I didn't know if you wanted to add. Okay. No, you're okay. I don't think there's any other hands, so I'll keep going. Oh, am I still good for time? Okay. When lower quality asphalt mix is used, are those mapped? Like that we know where we've used? I'm just again wondering if that plays into the prioritization, or especially if we can't get to the mapping or the regular checking of roads, if that would increase the frequency, because we know that we've used a lower quality asphalt in those areas.
Madam Chair, the information that drives the prioritization output is the condition of the road. And so there would be analysis, sort of backward facing analysis, that we would be able to say, geez, that one degraded quicker than we thought. I wonder why. Would be that type of analysis. But in terms of what gets prioritized, it's based on how's it doing. The roads that need rehabilitation are the ones that we recommend to council on based on our financial envelope.
Okay. The reason I asked that question is because I know the audit said that the traffic data was outdated from a best practices point of view, and that the pandemic may have contributed to that. But so pre-pandemic, the traffic data was more regular?
Madam Chair, the traffic data is always going to feel of a different date, and I can give you an example. So the traffic data that we collect this summer will be 2024 traffic data, and it will be an input to the road matrix model in early 2025 to kick off our cycle. So it's a 2025 model work. The output of that, when it goes through the prioritization methodology, it ends up considered in the budget in the fall of 2025, which is the 2026 program. So the most up-to-date data will always be labeled as 2 years difference. It was collected in 24. It's the 25 program that will be implemented in 2026. So it's really only a year old. It'll be 2 years old by the time we would do the work. The pandemic absolutely threw the traffic patterns, traditional traffic patterns, out the window. And so that is one of the findings of the auditor, is that we should establish what the standard is for the use of that traffic data, document what the consideration, what the evaluation points are to better support the decisions, and again, aim for consistency across the board in all of our recommendations.
Okay, thank you. I had another question that going back to the asphalt mix and the cost of the contract. So I know that other cities have used recyclables in their asphalt mix to lower costs over time. I don't know if it's lower cost initially. Has the city explored this at all?
Madam Chair, the city use recyclable asphalt as part of our mix. It is a strategy that we support to minimize our cost. We do have specifications for the amount of recyclable asphalt that we put in our mixes. I know that there are a lot of other ideas. We've been talking about tires. We've been talking about a lot of things over the years. I do not have experience with those. We did use something very creative many years ago. We tried it, it didn't work. So I cannot speak to other than the recyclable asphalt that we are using right now, and the part of the audit recommendation to make sure that we are getting what we are hoping is working on a risk-based analysis to develop good testing for that we don't have, and we don't have actually at a provincial standard anyways.
Is there an intersection between the work the solid waste master plan team is doing and your work in that regard when we're talking about recyclables? I'm wondering if there's some cross-pollination between what the solid waste master plan team is working on it when we're talking about recyclables and what your team is working on in implementing that.
Alan is coming.
Hello, Madam Chair. I wasn't expecting that question. So just for context, as part of the solid waste master plan and asphalt, no, there isn't provision for using recyclables in the asphalt. What we are always exploring is basically, are there materials that we could be recycling for other components in the asphalt? So often for sub-base material, used concrete that we may be breaking up. Some of the used asphalts that may not be appropriate as recycled asphalt, but we can still use it in the base material or as some of the backfills. That's typically where we would be looking at recycling some of the materials, but typically not in the asphalt, because the key thing about the asphalt is you want to protect the integrity of the material over the long term. So the more you're adding alternate substances, the more you risk basically degrading the quality of the asphalt over time.
Okay, thank you for that answer, but it's good to hear that there is some consideration going into what we're, I believe Tomlinson, I have a note here from my colleague that Tomlinson does use diversion in their projects. Is that correct? In projects in Ottawa, but the Tomlinson plant does use recyclables in their asphalt mixes.
They would certainly use recycled asphalt as part of their asphalt mix.
Okay.
There may be aggregates that they're mixing with concrete and all that, but I'm not sure about the asphalt mix itself, though.
Okay, thank you.
You can come back on, just that your 5 minutes was just right up. Councillor Kavanaugh.
Madam Chair, I think Mr. Phillips' hand was up. I don't know if you wanted to reply.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Just to add on to what the councillor was asking, I would point out that, and this was part of what I worked with the team in the audit. The more recycled asphalt you add into a virgin asphalt mix, the more you run the risk of that older asphalt cement. And maybe I ought to back up here for a second. In a recycled asphalt mix, the asphalt cement in the wrap, as we call it, is actually reheated and reutilized as part of that new mix. And the issue with that is the more of the wrap that you put in, it tends to be oxidized and harder, and it's not going to give you the performance that you want long term in terms of its ability to have the elastic qualities that that last through various freeze-thaw cycles, et cetera. So that sort of points to the one recommendation that we had with regards the recycling technologies. Those technologies are a little different in that what you're doing there is and you might have noticed that the prefix cold applies, cold in place recycling or cold in place recycled expanded mix, asphalt mix. In that instance, what you're doing is you're grinding up the wrap, but you're not reutilizing the asphalt cement. You're just coating that ground up combination of asphalt and aggregate. And then with either an emulsion or what we call an expanded asphalt. So that was where our recommendation was, that we thought that the city could look a little bit more into recycling. And in fact, I pointed out to a number of the folks I worked with here that going back in time, your predecessor, the regional municipality of Ottawa, Carleton, actually led the way back in 1989 with some of the initial cold in place recycling projects down on your side of the Ottawa, or of the canal, I guess, down at the Rideau River, down in the Kempville area. And surrounding municipalities and many of the projects that I work with the ministry too, we're always looking at these as alternatives as part of our design process. So that's just a little background in terms of when you're asking about recycling. I think there's lots of opportunity for reutilizing wrap in some of the other recycling technologies.
Great, thank you very much. Councillor Kavanagh?
Thank you, Chair. I just had one more question, and it was related to kind of the lumpiness of road use, because right now we're seeing a lot of trucks on roads in areas that don't normally have trucks, but because of, for example, in my area, stage 2 LRT and major construction projects close to the new transit stations. How does that get taken into account? Because normally those are not areas where you have heavy trucks, but it obviously is right now.
Madam Chair, if those roads are, the condition of those roads is suffering because of different traffic, it will show up the next time the pavement condition assessment is done. So that activity historically isn't something that feeds into the prioritization methodology, but it would show up in a change in condition that would be taken into account.
So somebody is bringing this to your attention. It's not my residents calling me saying how this road's gotten so bad.
Chair, another permit that we undertake in our shop is an overdimensional vehicle permit. And so that's for the exact size of vehicles that you're speaking of. When we get an application for one of those permits, there's a fee. And as part of our circulation process, we do share that permit with Ms. Johns' team to ensure that the road can withstand that weight and that volume of vehicle, and that there are warranties undertaken should there be any damage to our road through that construction, so that we can follow up with the contractor and up to laying notice of violation if our road work is damaged.
Oh, that would be interesting to know about, if for councillors, if that's possible to know that if that's been done.
Chair, we will be bringing forward a report on the road activity bylaw to Transportation Committee in the upcoming months, and certainly we could provide some detail on the ODV process in that report.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hughley.
Thank you, Chair. Just a follow-up to the question that Alan came forward and answered. Can I get clarification? Like he said, we, the city of Ottawa, is not looking at using aggregate or leftover product from incineration into the asphalt. But my understanding is a lot of the municipalities that do have incinerators have been looking at that in other jurisdictions, or maybe Ted Phillips can answer that. I believe there are reports out there about looking into how useful that product would be. So I don't want to leave it that Ottawa's not looking into it. There's a lot of things Ottawa's not looking into, but other jurisdictions are. Yeah. Can I get some insight on that, please?
Yes, Madam Chair, I wasn't really specific to using the byproduct of incineration. We don't have an incinerator in the city right now, so that's not a supply material that we would have. Obviously, it's something that if we did, we would be looking at the appropriateness of that as a material, and more importantly, appropriateness in what context. If it's being used as part of road reconstruction, where's the appropriate place to be using it? Is it the asphalt, or is it as part of the base or the granular material? But that's something that we would look at if and when that material becomes available.
Alan, are we aware that other jurisdictions are doing that? Are we following what their studies are doing in case we decide to go down the road of Durham and having an incinerator?
Madam Chair, absolutely. It's something that we are looking at. We're always looking at basically, is there a way that we can reduce basically not only our waste, but are there byproducts that we could be using as part of our reuse? So yes, it's definitely something that we are looking into.
Thank you. That's great to hear. That's my question. Thanks again, Alan.
Thank you very much. I just have two quick questions then. Just on the technology one that I asked the Auditor General. You know, I didn't dream this up, that there are cameras on these vehicles that we were looking at, roads and other conditions. Any comment on that?
We do have, I'm just looking through my notes, Madam Chair, because when you gave us a heads up for that, I do have a note from staff, if you can give me a sec.
This is a project that I understand Carleton University was working with the city on, and they were going to install cameras. And so I was just wondering if there's are we still looking at that? What is the status of that? Because it was an efficiencies and a savings opportunity.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the time. We do have an active pilot, something called City Rover, that is collecting data from the road using a cell phone camera and then feeding that into AI. To generate deficiencies. And then as part of the pilot, we would then validate the output of what the AI suggests and validate it with our own information and with field checks to see if it is a useful source for us.
Wonderful. Great. And then on many of the recommendations, there was a general theme about data just not being great. And the answers from staff were, yes, we're going to look at this Q1 2025, and some of them were immediately will change. Will that require new software? Is it more just how you do things, or is it the tools that you need to do this?
Thank you, Madam Chair. These will be improvements to the overall process. And I think in some of my earlier questions, I alluded to the benefits of consistency, and I think we can understand that. We have not at this time identified that it would be incremental tools. In the timelines that we've indicated in our management responses to the audit, is because we have a rough idea of what we'd be able to do, including things like research, checking with other municipalities. There are technical associations, Transportation Association of Canada, for instance, that we would be able to survey to inform us on what is the best practice for the standards of the data that we're using, but then also documenting and integrating that into our process. So at this point, we have not identified what the outcome would be. We'll do the work to figure out how to best satisfy and improve, but we haven't predicted or forecast what that would be.
Okay. All right. We'll stay tuned. All right. Oh, so committee members, we have a report recommendation that the audit committee receive the audit report and recommend that council consider and approve the recommendations. Is this item carried? All right. So we will switch now over to the investigation of OC Transpo's bus maintenance. We don't need to change seats yet, but I'll go to the Auditor General.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Le prochain rapport que nous souhaitons vous présenter aujourd'hui a trait à l'enquête sur l'entretien des autobus d'OC Transpo. J'aimerais prendre un moment pour remercier Madame Amilcar et son équipe. As I mentioned on the roads audit, obviously we worked very collaboratively. What you can imagine is when we come in, it's a little extra work on staff, and that's the general nature when it comes to an audit. When it comes to an investigation, we have a very different approach. What you might not know is in a lot of cases, a lot of the work is done behind the scenes where nobody in the department is aware that we are doing work. What I can say is when we start conducting various steps, if there's something of urgency, we bring it to management's attention. And what I would like to say, there was a couple of elements that I brought to Madame Amical's attention as soon as we had some form of validation with regards to them, and we did see very immediate actions. So before I pass it on to Joanne to walk through the presentation, I just wanted to highlight that because it is a very important aspect, especially when we start talking about compliance with provincial requirements or safety-related risks.
Next slide, please. Thank you. As a result of several reports received through the city's fraud and waste hotline, our office undertook an investigation to assess concerns with respect to OC Transpo's bus maintenance practices. The scope of our investigation was limited to assessing whether the allegations had merit, and if so, determining appropriate actions for any substantiated issues. However, to the extent that other control issues were identified and validated during the investigation, they've also been presented in our report. The investigation focused on three main areas: the oversight of the truck and coach technician apprentice program, also known as the 310T apprentice program, outsourced maintenance work, and compliance with preventive maintenance inspections for the period from January 2023 to May 2024. Next slide, please. Our investigation resulted in 4 main findings and 2 additional opportunities for improvement. The first 3 findings are related to the apprentice program. The first relates to apprentice supervision. Just as background, Skilled Trades Ontario is an agency of the Provincial Ministry of Labour, Immigration, Training and Skills Development, and is responsible for apprenticeship and skilled trade certification in Ontario. While Skilled Trades Ontario does not mandate specific expectations for apprentice supervision, based on industry best practices, we expected to see formalized apprentice supervision processes and evidence of sign-off by a licensed mechanic when apprentices work on safety components of the buses. Our investigation found no formal documentation outlining specific responsibilities and expectations for apprentice supervision, and detailed testing revealed that apprentice supervision and sign-off is not consistently evidenced. More specifically, our detailed testing indicated that of our sample of preventive maintenance inspection check sheets performed by an apprentice, 53% of them were not signed off by the licensed 310T mechanic, and in most cases, there was no evidence through the maintenance system that the work was being supervised. Additionally, we found one instance where there was no evidence of supervision of an apprentice performing a rear brake replacement, a critical safety component of the bus. While apprentices need hands-on experience working on critical safety systems, they must be adequately supervised as they do not necessarily have the sufficient knowledge and experience to complete these tasks on their own. Apprentices who work on critical safety systems without direct supervision of licensed mechanics could lead to safety risks, ultimately exposing the city to liability in the event of an incident. The second finding relates to salary premiums that were paid to apprentices that they were not entitled to. Our investigation identified that garage supervisors had approved premiums for apprentices performing break-in inspection jobs that they were not eligible for, resulting in them getting paid mechanic premium rates. We calculated the total ineligible premium payments made to apprentices in 2023 to be just under $32,000. Management confirmed that this issue was flagged in January of 2024, and an internal review was undertaken and ultimately resulted in the decision that the premiums would not be clawed back from the apprentices. Management indicated that communication was provided verbally in January 2024 to stop this practice immediately. However, our office could not substantiate this as the official communication was not formally documented. For the period from January to May of 2024, our testing indicated that an additional $9,410 of ineligible premium payments were made to apprentices. This indicates that the practice has continued despite the garage supervisors being instructed to stop. The third finding relates to one situation where an apprentice who was working on buses did not have the required registration with Skilled Trades Ontario. To practice legally in Ontario, an apprentice must hold a registered training agreement, certificate of qualification, and their information must appear on the Skilled Trades Ontario public register. We identified one apprentice who, according who, according to OC Transpo records, had been working on buses prior to registration with Skilled Trades Ontario. Having an apprentice working on buses without adequate registration represents a compliance issue with the province of Ontario and increases the risk of insufficient qualifications of individuals maintaining the bus fleet. Next slide, please. The fourth finding relates to oversight of vendor performance. In 2023, approximately 1.8% of OC Transpo's maintenance work was outsourced, totaling $3.1 million. Typically, work is only outsourced when there are in-house resource and capacity constraints or when the work would fall under warranty coverage. Our investigation substantiated specific instances where vendors failed to properly complete safety checks and other maintenance work which could have posed a safety risk while the bus was in service. During the investigation, we learned that there is no defined or formalized quality assurance process in place to guide inspections of outsourced work before a bus is put into service. Without mitigating quality assurance processes, issues related to vendor work increases the risk to public safety and the city's exposure to liability. Our audit also identified 2 additional opportunities for improvements related to standardized process documentation and the maintenance of electronic records. Our report made 6 recommendations and management has agreed to all of them. Next slide, please. This concludes our presentation. We would be happy to take questions committee members may have related to this investigation.
Thank you. Just councillors, there are no delegations for this item. So questions for the Office of the Auditor General. Councillor Hill.
Thank you very much, Madam Auditor, for the report. On page 6 of the investigation, you highlighted a specific instance of an apprentice performing a critical safety rear brake replacement without evidence of supervision. Was this the only instance that you could find of an apprentice completing unsupervised work on the critical safety features of the bus fleet?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Chair, through you. Our testing was on a sample basis, and most of the work that we're doing in terms of looking at the work performed by apprentices was related to inspections. And this was one in particular that was a piece of work that the apprentice was actually working on the bus itself, not just doing the inspection. So in that case, it was the only one we found.
On the same page, you noted that 53% of the inspections tested, the 310T apprentices were signing preventative maintenance inspection check sheets where no licensed 310T mechanic had signed off. Were those reports signed by garage supervisors? And if so, were those supervisors not licensed 310T mechanics?
Thank you for the question, Councillor, through you, Chair. I think our report does indicate that there was a small subsample where, in fact, there was one check sheet that was not signed off by the supervisor, but in the most cases, they were signed off by the supervisor. But we did note that the supervisor sign off is a little bit more of a holistic oversight. They're not looking at inspecting the buses themselves. That's what we've learned through our investigation, sorry.
And from that, how do you define critical safety features? Is there a higher reference, or is that a term that you came up with?
We were looking at, we actually worked with a subject matter expert at the beginning of our work, and who helped us define things like brakes and things like that as critical safety components, yes.
Based on your investigation, do you believe that the issue of bus maintenance requires a formal audit? And if so, where could we expect that audit?
That's a very good question. And where do I start to answer that question? First and foremost, I think we've given OC Transpo some very good starting points for them to implement. So I would like to give them the opportunity to implement these various aspects. This isn't the first time that we've looked at whether it be bus maintenance or overall training with regards to bus operators. I do think it would warrant in the future another look. That being said, we do try to manage how frequently we hit the same area. We're a small group, as you can imagine, so we have to prioritize the work that we do. But I do think, as I mentioned, that this particular investigation will give them a good head start in addressing some of the gaps. And I'm sure when it comes time to staff answering questions, that Madame Almacal will let you know a little bit about the program and steps that she has in place to address these.
Thank you. Based on your investigation and management's subsequent responses, Do you believe that the current bus maintenance program poses a safety risk for the public?
Chair, thank you for the question. Councillor, I would say that there are instances in which we have seen that we do not have comfort with regards to the steps that have been taken. That being said, we are being provided assurances by management, and I believe management can also attest with regards to the union speaking to this particular element as well, that I don't think any individual working on these buses would ever intentionally do anything or put a rider in jeopardy. I hate to say it, anything we do that's manually done has room for error. I think the mayor has clearly outlined, as well as the city manager, the shortage of resources that we have. And I do think this is likely in large part due to a result of resource constraints.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Councillor Carr.
Hi, thank you very much for your work on this investigation. I found it very interesting. I just have one question. Is your overall observation that a lot of these issues with respect to maintenance occurred because of a general lack of process or an unwillingness to use procedures, or was there any observation that perhaps that this is a deeply seated staffing issue?
Sure, I think it's a very complex answer to a very complex question. I think over the years, OC Transpo has gone through many structural changes. I think Madame Emeka has brought in some very good changes. I do believe she was made aware of some of these particular instances along the lines of when we had commenced our investigation, not through us, but through, I think, some internal staff members. So I think that speaks volumes with regards to the trust that staff are placing in their senior management within that department. But I do think there's definitely a lack of procedures, and I think that is a long-standing issue. What you'll see in the industry, all trades are in demand right now. There's a significant shortage, and that is deeply impacting OC Transpo. I don't think OC Transpo has ever had so many apprentices that they've had to manage. So I think they're also looking at a very unique and different circumstance than in the past.
Yeah, thanks. That was kind of the crux of my question, because certainly we've struggled with the lack of maintenance on the buses, which has impacted the fleet. So, and I know it's been a member of the Transit Commission that we've certainly heard on the strategy to bring in more apprentices to deal with this shortage. So I was just trying to link those two things. Thank you very much again for all your work on this.
Thank you. And I would just add to that, I think one other element that is likely compounding the issue is the age of the buses. So that in itself is requiring more maintenance, and by default, you need more mechanics in order to meet that demand.
Perfect. Thank you.
I just have one overall question, and that is, can you remind us about, when there's an audit, you have follow-up audits, investigations, what's the process?
Thank you for the question, Chair. Similarly, we also do a follow-up process. I don't think it was the past with my predecessor, but we felt that obviously if we're going to issue recommendations, we want to make sure that they are implemented and that they're implemented to address the issue, gap, or risk that we've identified. So they will fall as part of our follow-up process.
Wonderful. That gives us some comfort, I think. All right. Questions for staff? Bonjour. Bonjour. Councillor Lowe.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, last time they were in transit and we lost the question. So I brought this up at Transit Commission last week, and it was sort of about the procurement of our buses. The way that it has been done previously is that we purchased very large orders of buses at once, right? 420 something Enveros at once, 300 something articulated buses at once. And these buses are all aging out at the same time. And no doubt that places a tremendous pressure on maintenance staff. Now that I noticed that with the Nova buses, we've been shrinking each order, but making more orders. And perhaps that will help with keeping up with staggered maintenance and everything as different tranches, different orders of buses age. So with that demand, with that added demand right now, obviously you're taking on more apprentices. There's probably more pressure to hire more mechanics as well. Do you see a shift in that, like as let's say in the future when all of our buses were ordered in those smaller orders? Like what kind of flex do you see in staffing requirements at the maintenance level in the next let's say 5 years or so?
Thank you, Chair, for the question. I will start and maybe Remy can help me on that one. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to explain what you just said. Indeed, when we have to manage a fleet, a bus fleet, it's better to have to spread the purchasing, because first, if we have a breakdown, if we have a recall, so we don't have this recall on the same work order, I would say. And it's better as well for the maintenance side, because you don't want all of your mandatory inspections arrive in the same time, et cetera, et cetera. That said, this is the reality here, unfortunately, and we have a good opportunity with the e-buses to try to spread those purchases. But that brings another constraint to our daily operations, because now we have to deal with the former diesel buses, and then we need to phase in the e-buses. Hopefully, we will be able to do that, and that will keep our fleet on an average of 5, maximum 6 years to be able to be very performant. When we have to deal with some buses, actually those articulate buses have more than 16, 17, 18 years. It's not great, but we are on a process to shift that trend to make sure that we can easily maintain the fleet, to get a sustainable daily bus count, because this is the reality. Daily, I would say even twice a day, we have to perform, because we need a lot of buses for the peak AM and we need a lot of buses for the peak PM. So we have to deal on a daily basis with two very, very important performance with what we have on hand. On top of that, for sure, I think you bang on when you talk about the recruitment. Mechanics here in Ottawa, it's very, very hard. No, I would not say it's only Ottawa. It was the same thing in Montreal, frankly. But with the pandemic, we know that we have faced with a lot of shortages everywhere on every kind of specialties, most with people, who work with their hands. So we know as well that here in Ottawa, it's really difficult to attract mechanics, because we don't pay them similar as the private sector. And we ask them to work 24/7, because we work 7 days on a 3 shifts. And frankly, I would love to be able to have a lot of them Saturday and Sunday, because this is where I don't need a lot of buses. So we could maintain those buses to be ready for the weekdays, but it's not like that work, because we want to maintain them and to retain them and to attract them. So this is another level of difficulty that we have to deal with. So that's why we have 30 apprentices. It's a lot. 30 apprentices for 140, 150 mechanics. It's massive. It's a lot of pressure on OC Transport to be able to teach those mechanics their courses, to let them go to Algonquin College, to come back at OC Transport, to monitor them. We need 5 years to do so. So it's a lot of job, but I agree with all of the recommendation that the AG reported, because this is something that we knew and we were working on. And if you recall, on November last year, 2023, I presented at the Transit Commission a thorough action plan, and to be able to deliver the 99.5% of service delivery daily. So I presented three things. We need bus drivers. Hopefully now, for the first time since I have been here, it's not a problem anymore. We have achieved our goal. We just maintain now. Check done. New ways to bus. It's ready. but we will need to launch it. And the other one, if you reminder, it was the action plan, because we knew that we have aged buses, and we know as well that we have to deal with the fact that the electric buses transformation is delayed by the Infrastructure Canada and by recommendation from the AG as well to go slowly, which was a good recommendation. But the reality is we were not set up to deal with those inconveniences, and now we have to deal with them. Hopefully I answered to your questions.
Yeah, you did actually. That it covers that and more. So thanks very much for that. The second part of my question then deals with the outsourcing that happens. I'm sure it's related to everything you just said, but I am curious about the what the AG in her report said about the lack of oversight of the buses that come back, right, from whichever vendor that we go out to. What is the process supposed to be?
Thank you very much for the question. Rami will explain the process that he and his team have put in place. That said, I would like to say that yearly we have approximately 67,000 work orders to maintain the fleet, and less than 2% of those work orders are giving to the vendors. That represent 2,000 work orders on approximately on the 67 that we have to deal with. First thing. Second, most of the time, the vendors with whom we work, they are professionals. They know what they are doing. And I agree that we need to supervise them a little bit more. I don't think it will be relevant to send something to the vendor and ask the same mechanic to do the job after that, because when we decide to bring something outside, it's because we have a lack of expertise here in-house. So using this expertise to double check and it's human, because when we do that, because of the MTO's responsibility that each individual, each employee has, he will redo the job because he will not sign up if it's not him. And I would not do that, me neither as an engineer. If someone asked me to, Renee, can you double check this plan? I will do the plan myself before to put my signature on. So I think our responsibility at OC Transpo is to better supervise those vendors. We have to reduce as well the work with them. Even if 2,000 for me, it's really, really low. So the risk is low. And by the way, internally, we have to supervise as well better our employees, even if they are good mechanics, they are experts, but errors is human, we know that. So it's, for me, when I received that report, it was a very good opportunity to reinforce what we have already begun with the team. And it was very well received because it's the way we want things to be done. We want to be sure that we avoid Westboro, Valleyfield. We don't want those big accidents. And I'm not saying that they were related to a lack of maintenance, but we don't want that. So we are doing our due diligence. We are working very, very hard with the union, with the employees, and we have a lot of levels to be able to inspect, re-inspect, and check and balance. So the employees are certified mechanics, and we know that we just talk about the apprentices. I removed this group from the maintenance department. I put it under the chief safety officer because there is a safety related to that. And the way that they work, they have time to be able to make sure that all the processes are respected and we can double verify things. So this is a very important thing. And I know as well that since we have done that, we see a better result as well, because I don't know if you're aware, but to train an apprentice, we need 5 years. But after 1 or 2 years, if they're not improving their lessons, we are on our right to say, okay, you cannot say here. So we need that supervision, and it's a direct supervision. So that's why we have asked another department to take that, so we can have this neutral, I would say, direct supervision, and we can make sure that we're doing the right thing. Rami, please, can you explain the process that you have put in place? Sorry for that today. I'm a little bit vocal.
Thank you, Renee. Chair, there's not much to add on top of what Madame Milka has added. The only thing I can add to this is that we have also established a strategic maintenance planning team that is now looking at data behind the scenes, because we don't have the ability to have someone check every bus that comes back. If we did, that person would also be doing the job. We might as well not send it to the vendor. But however, we have to be strategic. We have to sample. We have to look at the type of defects we're seeing in our buses. And this is how we're looking at it. We put together a position that is a coordinator level, who looks at quality assurance, that works hand in hand with the new manager of fleet maintenance, a very experienced individual that we hired earlier this year. And this person, together with the fleet manager, are looking at the buses coming back from the vendors and following up with vendors to make sure that they're doing the best job possible. Earlier this week, I had a call with my counterpart from Supply, who also is reaching out to help us develop future contracts where we have certain established service levels and quality assurance levels that we can hold our vendors accountable to. Thank you.
Cool. Well, I mean, at least one of our copies are kicking in. Thank you. That's very helpful. That's it. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Councillor Hill.
Thank you very much. I'll start on the same issue. I don't fully understand if we identify that there's a maintenance requirement for a vehicle and we don't have the capacity internally to manage it, and we go to an external vendor. Why would we set the conditions to send that vehicle to an external vendor if we then knew that we will need to redo the maintenance anyway? Do we not have a list of, acceptable maintenance outcomes that are provided to a specific standard that, would take 14 hours of labor, but then 15 minutes for us internally to sign off versus a 1-to-1 ratio? I just don't understand why are we even talking about a scenario where we possibly could send something out to an external vendor for maintenance and then redo the maintenance when it comes back?
Madam Chair, we definitely did agree with the investigation's results from the Office of the Auditor General. It was the case, perhaps. It's no longer the case. We have changed the process. We are in the process of actually getting to a point where we have a better understanding of the type of work that we should, in advance, plan to go to outsource based on the hours of maintenance available to us every day. We have changed the type of maintenance we're sending out. So we're looking at different jobs that are not safety related, perhaps. For example, air conditioned work, heat work, things that a 310T mechanic doesn't have to sign off on, because the worst case scenario, it's a defect that we can return back to a vendor. So we've changed the type of work we're sending out, and we're trying our best to keep everything in-house that is crucial for a 310T mechanic to sign off on.
Okay, thank you for that.
If I may, I would like just to complete what Rami just said. We have a collective agreement in place and we respect it. So 10 days before we send something outside, we need to, how many? 10, okay, thanks. I was not sure if it was 10 or 8, but 10 days before we send a job to a vendor, we have to sit with the union. We have to try to find solutions together, and then we can send it. So it's a long process, but we follow that process, and there is nothing that we do without them. And when we can find solution to keep the job in-house, we do that. And this is the way that it works. I think it's important to understand as well.
On that as well, then, are there mechanisms that we can perhaps be more efficient if it's a long process in that discussion with the union and with the maintainers internally and the vendors, where an identified list of very specific and unique, perhaps non-safety related maintenance outcomes are identified so that that process could take less time. Because I'm assuming if you're waiting 10 days to determine if you're going to fix the air conditioning on a bus, that's a bus that's perhaps not in service for 10 days for a maintenance related issue.
That is correct, Madam Chair. However, I want to acknowledge that we are working very well with the union. We have a collective agreement to respect. We respect it, but we have very good discussion. And now, because of those e-buses that are late, we are working on a plan with them to see what we can do. We will need their collaboration. We will need to probably have an agreement together to be able to do things to help us at transport to stay on top of everything. But the collective agreement is followed. It's a little bit hard because it's not flexible to have an easy turnaround. That said, the collaboration is very great.
After reviewing the auditor's investigation, do you believe that you have the systems in place to ensure the public safety on the OC Transpo bus fleet?
100%, Madam Chair. Otherwise, I would stop everything as I used to do.
I was concerned to see in the auditor's report that despite a direction from management to stop improper payment of mechanic premiums to apprentices in January, that the process continued for another 7 months before more formal communication was sent. Since the communication in July, has there been any new instances of improper payments made to apprentices? And why did management not follow up between January and July to confirm the payments had ceased?
Madam Chair, it's disappointing as well for myself that the instructions were not followed. However, we were going through a small restructure within our management team, so some things may have fell administratively. However, the reason why it wasn't very straightforward to the supervisors is because of the systems we have in place are outdated. The process is outdated. We're using sign-off sheets and sign-up codes. With the new implementation of our M5 system, which is what we use for bus maintenance planning, this type of error will not be happening because it's no longer a manual process. It will be automatic. So it was just a manual error that we followed up on.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
I'm glad to hear that. Thank you, Councillor Carr.
Thank you very much. Une question pour Madame Carr. Je crois que vous avez indiqué que nous avons atteint 90% des conducteurs nécessaires, mais je ne crois pas avoir entendu de mise à jour sur le nombre d'apprentis mécaniciens. Dans le rapport de l'enquête, il est dit qu'au moment du rapport, il y avait 33 apprentis, mais qu'il y avait des plans en place pour augmenter le nombre d'ici à la fin de l'an. Est-ce que nous sommes sur la bonne voie?
Merci pour la question, Madame Chair. Oui, alors pour les opérateurs, les chauffeurs d'autobus, pour la première fois depuis que je suis ici en 3 ans, on a atteint notre objectif d'avoir le bon nombre de personnes et d'être capable de faire face à l'attrition parce qu'on sait que les trains, c'est dans le même bassin des chauffeurs qu'on vient chercher les gens. Alors, on a le Trailer Line qu'il fallait ouvrir, on a l'Est qui on travaille dessus, il y a l'Ouest qui s'en vient. Donc, pour la première fois, on peut dire que nous avons atteint notre objectif et nous en sommes très, très fiers parce que même malgré la pénurie de main-d'œuvre partout, OC Transpo, avec une bonne équipe de recrutement en place, a mis ça. Donc, ça, c'est très, très bien. Au niveau des mécaniciens, c'est beaucoup plus difficile pour les raisons que j'ai évoquées tout à l'heure, à l'effet que le marché est très, très bon pour ces gens-là parce que dans le privé, ils peuvent avoir 3, 4, 5 $ de plus de l'heure et puis ils ont tous les week-ends off puis ils ne travaillent pas la nuit. Ça, c'est vraiment le travail rêvé pour tout quelqu'un qui travaille manuellement. Nous, à OC Transpo, on est en centre de transport, on doit offrir du service 24/7. Et comme je l'ai mentionné en anglais tout à l'heure, moi, mon rêve, c'est d'avoir beaucoup de gens qui travaillent samedi, dimanche parce que c'est là que j'ai des autobus disponibles, parce que j'ai moins besoin d'autobus sur la route. Alors, je pourrais faire tous mes maintenances préventives pendant les week-ends. La semaine, je serais super. Malheureusement, ce n'est pas le cas. On a à peu près une trentaine d'apprentis. Ça prend 5 ans pour les former. L'équipe sous le acting CSO Dwayne Duquette a mis toute une structure en place à ma demande parce qu'on avait des lacunes à ce niveau-là. On l'a reconnu. D'ailleurs, on l'a partagé aussi à l'auditrice lorsqu'elle nous en a parlé. Et moi, je suis très contente de ce que je vois, très honnêtement. Ça va prendre du temps. Puis, on identifie aussi un certain risque pour ces transports parce qu'à un moment donné, il va falloir qu'on continue quand même à attirer des mécaniciens. Et là, ce qu'on voit, c'est que les gens qui sont déjà formés, qui ont leur licence, ils viennent pas chez nous parce qu'ils vont dans le privé. Et on a été même plus loin parce qu'on est proactif dans nos actions. On a donné un genre d'incitatif à nos apprentis pour que quand ils vont graduer, qu'ils restent avec nous. Parce que la dernière chose qu'on veut, c'est mettre 5 ans sur eux, puis après ça, ils vont avoir leur licence et ils vont s'en aller dans le secteur privé. Donc, on a mis un genre d'incitatif en place pour justement les retenir un petit peu. Est-ce qu'on est à risque aujourd'hui d'en perdre? Oui. Est-ce qu'on met le maximum de choses qu'on peut mettre en place tout en gérant les fonds publics? Oui.
OK, bon, merci beaucoup pour la mise à jour. Je l'apprécie. Autre question. I will skip it into English. I was interested in the fact that we had somebody with falsified credentials working on staff. Is this something that's happened before? Was this a case of falsified or they didn't have adequate credentials? Sorry, I read my question out wrong. How did it happen that we had somebody without adequate credentials? Is it because they were falsified or they just simply didn't exist? Sorry, I misread my own shorthand. You can see why.
Madam Chair, we work very closely with the Skills Trade Ontario, which is the group that oversees the apprentice program from the provincial government side. However, they were going through a change in their systems. I'm not too sure of the actual details. And that's why some of the records were not showing. Our team actually did follow up with STO, and we manually verified that this person was indeed registered, and it was an error with their system, not on our side. It just took a few months to get a solid response on that, which is why it showed in the report.
Okay, so this is really a one-off type event. Okay, perfect, thanks. And then I just had one silly question at the end. With respect to the vendor issues, I'm assuming that these are vendors that are on a standing offer, correct? And that you're accessing them all of the time?
Yes, that's correct, Madam Chair.
Okay. I have some questions about dollar values, but I'll ask them outside of audit committee. Thank you.
All right. So, seeing no further questions, we have a recommendation that the audit committee received the investigation of OC Transpo bus maintenance report and recommend that council consider and approve the recommendation. Is this item carried?
Carried.
All right. So we have two more items here. Neither has a presentation. So, committee members, for the semi-annual report on follow-up procedures, you have questions for the Office of the Auditor General? Overall, it was a very positive report. Things are moving along. Some still not finished, but still moving along. All right. Well, so seeing no questions, the report recommendation for this one is that the audit committee recommend council receive the semi-annual report on follow-up procedures. Is this item carried?
It's a good one.
Okay. All right. The next one then is with the Auditor General's audit work plan. This is letting us know that she has a plan for the Ottawa Police Service. Questions, comments? Councillor Hubley.
Thank you, Chair. I have hopefully just one or two questions on this for the AG. The items listed on page 3 that say that they'll be reviewed for up to 2027. I'm concerned that some examples on there, such as the rules for during protests. Do we know if the Ottawa Police are internally reviewing that right now and not waiting for the AG to report back? Because there's a lot of concerns with, for example, covering faces and things like that to do with the current handling of these protests. So do we have any indication that they're looking at this now, or are they waiting for your report?
Chair, the Ottawa Police Service three-year plan that we put together is very similar to the plan that we put together for the city. I'm very proud of it. I do want to just highlight that this is the first time ever that our office has been requested to do work of this nature for the service. So we're very much looking forward to being able to provide some value to the service from this perspective. So very similarly to our plan, we lay out what we anticipate getting done within this period of time and scope. So in this case, we're anticipating starting these 3 audits by the end of 2027. This additional list that you see are those for consideration. So we always have a list of considerations in case something comes up. I could give you an example of we're going to go look at staffing, and we find out that there's some significant changes in that area that perhaps warrant a pause in that work, and then we may rethink what it is that we're looking at. So I firstly want to caution that this is a kind of a list for us to select from if priorities need to change. It is not currently a priority that we are looking at during this 3-year period. What I can say is these are obviously all elements that the service is working on, and we always touch base with them prior to starting an audit to see what's in the pipeline and whether or not we are still in a position to add value.
So you're able to confirm that they are looking at all of those items right now, that there's some activity happening on trying to improve or on those items, and also based on your comments, you're saying you may not look at these items, that they're not actually items you're going to look at. Are those 2 points correct based on what you just said?
Chair, what I can say, definitely the latter point, Councillor Hubley, you are correct in stating that these aren't things that we are currently planning to look at. They are higher risk elements that we have put on our potential of to-dos should priorities shift or change, or should we have additional resources that come available to us and choose to do additional work for the service. What I can say is these are all high-risk elements that we've identified, and they're moving pieces. I don't want to speak for the chair of the Ottawa Police Service Board or for the chief with regards to their specific actions at the moment. It would be inappropriate for me to speak to that at Audit Committee. It would be for a discussion at the Ottawa Police Service Board.
Yeah, I'm not asking you to speak for their specific actions. I'm asking if you have any indication that they are looking at doing something internally now to improve in those areas. I'm not asking you their specific actions. Because to me, that would help prioritize whether you look at any of the stuff or not. And my concern is that they may not be doing anything and waiting for your report. I'm trying to get some clarification around that. So I'd appreciate it. It's as straightforward an answer as I can get from you.
Chair, I'd be happy to answer, but I just do want to put a caveat around something that hasn't been stated is this item is being brought to committee so you understand how my office's resources are being used. It's very important to see the delineation between the Ottawa Police Services Board and the Audit Committee's role with regards to this particular item, which is why I'm caveating my responses. I think all of you know I'm a very direct individual usually, so please know I'm not trying to be evasive with the question. I'm just trying to ensure that I'm not breaking kind of that legal boundary with regards to which oversight committee is responsible for which items. What I can say is just like we do with our audit plan, we conducted a risk assessment that outlined these particular elements as higher risk. That being said, I can state, and I'm sure that the chief and the chair of the board would be comfortable with me stating this, these are all elements that are on their radar. The service is not going to stop doing work because we have a potential audit down the pipeline. And if they do, that's something that's out of my control, not something that I'm currently aware of.
Okay, well, we're in a very fortunate position because I'm sure taxpayers would like to know answers to these questions. So we're in a very fortunate position that the chair of the audit committee is also our representative, one of our representatives on the police board. So Chair Curry, I'll take this up with you offline and see if we can get more direct answers for taxpayers on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hubley. I think you'll be hearing a lot more from the Police Services Board on some of your questions as well. And I will note that our next speaker is the Vice Chair of the Ottawa Police Services Board, Councillor Carr.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your work on this. I just wanted to ask, I believe you mentioned, so this is the first time that the Ottawa Police Services Board has asked for the Auditor General to be involved in some of the work for the police service, correct?
Chair, yes, that is correct. I've spoken with previous board chairs, and this is the first time that it was, I guess, an item of appetite for the board.
So you previously had done an audit earlier this year on the Ottawa Police Services Board with respect to the response to the convoy. How was that audit? Who asked you to undertake that audit?
So that was a joint request that came through the city manager's office as well as the chair of the board with support from the chief. So we have conducted, in this case, there would be 2 audits in the past over the tenure of our office, but we have never been requested to put together a plan and to then conduct those at, I'd say, at our leisure, so to speak. So where we have the determination of what the audit topics are per se.
400 million?
And if you're curious as to what the previous audit was, there was an audit with regards to the Ottawa Police Services Board governance that was conducted quite a few years ago.
Okay, so specifically, this is the first time that you've ever looked at Ottawa Police Services, which I think is really important to highlight because the amount of the budget that they have as a proportion of city services, it's like 9.7%. I think last year. I'm close. I think it's really critical that we have the involvement of the AG. So it's something that I really welcome and look forward to your involvement. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. So seeing no further questions here, the motion for this one is that the audit committee recommend council receive the 2024-2027 audit work plan for the Ottawa Police Service. Is this item carried? Carried. It's received, eh? Yeah, so is this item received? Yes, received, received. All right, so in-camera items, I see none. Notice of motions, does anyone have anything? We are not aware of any. Inquiries, any inquiries? No. And any other business? No. All right, our next meeting is November 25th, 2024. We'll see you all then. Thank you very much.
I had a murder in my ward last night. Yeah, right next to my ward office.
I know, Herringate, terrible.
Anyway.